I'm Connor Old, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Controlled Chaos. Today we're going to be looking at a very controversial director, a very interesting director nonetheless. Sometimes he's at the greatest director of all time status, and other times he's a disappointing talent. He is the director of Platoon, of Born on the 4th of July, of Natural Born Killers, and the most recent Snowden. He is Oliver Stone. So, welcome back, guys. If you're new to the series, what we do every single week is we break down a new filmmaker and talk about what makes them great. That's a sort of central topic, but we also look at what I consider their best movie, my favorite movie of theirs, and then an underrated movie of theirs, all in my opinion, of course. But if you're sort of a loyal follower, welcome back. One thing you do notice different is I actually have a mic. Freaking commenter Michael, who's, loves to hear his comments all the time. He requested, up the audio quality. So I went out and got a mic. And he was right. I've been doing this. I do this for the fans. I do this for a great film community. So upping the production ante when I can is always the best possible thing. So I'm trying it out. Maybe give me some liberties to see if this works. If it doesn't work, I hope it does at least. And but let's just jump right into it. Oh, and the first thing, I have a bit of a cold right now. So if that is sort of the audio problem you're worrying about right now, that's just because I sort of have a hoarse throat in that sense. But anyways, we'll still jump right into it. And today we're looking at Oliver Stone. The first thing when I think of Oliver Stone is sort of like these political movies in a sense. He's very political, and especially in the American sense, so whether it be JFK or George W. Bush movie W, or something like the most recent Snowden. They always have something to do with the government or the American government. And a lot of the times sort of a cynical look or a negative look at it, similar to like a Michael Mann, where they say like, look at all the stuff that they're doing wrong, but does have that optimistic thing, like we can change this, whether it be like JFK was, supposedly assassinated by the government, or Edward Snowden was this sort of American hero that released that the government was doing all these bad things. And he's sort of an anti-establishment sort of director guy. One thing he likes to point out, though, is that he's not a journalist. He's actually what he calls a dramatist, as he specifies actually in this interview here with Stephen Colbert. And he essentially just means that he's not really looking for stuff and trying to break new ground. He's just trying to sort of highlight to the public things that are happening, as well as just telling everyone like, hey, this is happening, and I'm not going to go into it necessarily further, but make it dramatized into a movie in a sense, and condensing into that 2-hour sense to make it real and make it as entertaining as possible, because like he says, he does make thrillers. Another thing I want to point out is that he does a lot of conspiracies. He's sort of like that, like I said, sort of anti-establishment sort of like guy, sort of in the woods with his tinfoil hat. That's what a lot of people sort of point him and picture him as. And he is that to a sense, because a lot of his movies throughout his long-standing career are about sort of America and the American dream, or just about the corruption of the American government and missteps here, whether it be Vietnam or looking at the presidents. He does that quite often. But those movies are still fantastic, and he's still a fantastic director, and that's why I wanted to talk about him. Another thing I want to point out is that all of his movies are very thought-provoking and interesting. I really just think that when I think of all his movies, they're always engaging. They're always on the edge of your seat. And that's actually one thing I've been looking into recently, is about the audience demandment and sort of the sort of disbelief that you put yourself into when you're watching a movie. Spielberg was actually talking about this in terms of Jaws, and about just past the halfway point of Jaws, there's like a propane tank explosion type of thing, and one of the people told him hey, this wouldn't happen, this is not a realistic thing, this doesn't happen on real boats. But he said, I got the audience this far, I can make this one mistake or this one sort of flaw in logic. And that's a sort of common screenwriting thing, but I think Oliver Stone does that a lot, and when he's at his best, it's so engaging because he really rides that line. But he's a very risky director for doing that. But what he does is a lot of times is he makes it very grounded in reality for the first sort of hour and whatnot. And then sort of, because you're engaged, because you're sort of believing what's going on, he can make some leaps in logic, especially something like JFK. It's a conspiracy theory movie after all, but by the time of it, you're so engaged, especially in the park bench scene. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to say anything aside from the park bench scene. You're so engaged and captivated, is this the truth? Is this what's happening? Is this him sort of revealing that the government killed John F. Kennedy? And it's just you're so engaged, and you can sort of ignore some of the leaps in logic that film makes, because you're so engaged and because he's earned that respect from the audience. And Spielberg does a great job with this, and so is Oliver Stone. He really is fantastic. But like I said at the beginning, he has some high highs and he has some low lows, because he definitely swings for the fences, and sometimes he hits it and sometimes he misses. He's definitely sort of a director, unlike a Sidney Lumet, who we covered last week, who sort of his last movie was a great movie. It's an underrated movie, and one of his best, in my opinion. But he is a director who has sort of been falling off. I liked his last recent movie, Snowden, a lot more than most people, actually. It was an enjoyable movie for me. But it's still not like a Born on the 4th of July or Platoon, or, he wrote the screenplay to Scarface. It's not those movies. Those are seminal movies, and that's like any director. They peak their prime, and then that's it. And, those sort of directors are what I'm covering because, I don't want to cover like Denis Villeneuve, one of my favorite directors right now. Arrival was my favorite movie last year, but I'm not going to cover him now because we still have Blade Runner and Dune, and he has a long-standing career. So I'm going to be starting to look at a little more guys who are like older or who have passed away, unfortunately. I'm looking at Oliver Stone. He's still going to make more movies, but he is in his 70s, close to his 80s now. So he's only going to make a few more, if any, and I feel confident doing this episode. Another thing I want to point out is just that people often say that he's sort of one-sided and biased, so much like they would say a Michael Mann, except Michael Mann makes documentaries and Oliver Stone makes dramas. But I think that when he's at his best, he doesn't do that. When he's at his worst, yes, I see it one-sided, where he's painting one picture that these people are evil and these people are good, sort of draw a line in the sand. And it's like, okay, well, that's not really what a movie's supposed to do. It's supposed to change perspectives and make you think, right? Like a movie like JFK or Born on the 4th of July. But in his best, he doesn't necessarily show the other side is evil. He just shows the other side is different. Especially with Born on the 4th of July, just the whole sort of change in ideology and war, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And just the fact that they're not evil, but they're different, and there's not necessarily villains. It's gray and it's muddy. But in some of his worst movies, like Alexander, I had to sit through that. Boy, that was a bad movie. He tries, and he tries to go for these sort of grandiose tales of sort of greed and whatnot, in Scarface and Alexander and in Wall Street, for example. But sometimes he hits it like Wall Street, but then he doesn't hit like Wall Street 2, Money Never Sleeps. That was not a good movie either. Shia LaBeouf there. But nonetheless, Oliver Stone is still a great, great director. And the last thing I want to point out is that, I'm a Canadian, but I still find his movies interesting. So if you're an international person and you're still wondering about, oh, he's an American director, because he is very much an American director, will I like him? I would say yes, you would, because it's still engaging, it's still thrilling, and see a government sort of going against them, and not necessarily all of his movies are government-based. You have Wall Street, sort of the business side of the movie, and Born on the 4th of July, which is government and political based, but it's still about a war and the Vietnam War, and it's still sort of like a war movie in a sense. Actually, let's transition right into that. That is what I consider his best movie and my favorite movie, and that is Born on the 4th of July. Right here, I got here. Great, great movie. Tom Cruise, maybe the best performance he's ever done. I love him in this movie. Actually, before he was doing all action movies, he was doing Oscar nomination movies, and Tom Cruise is one of my favorite actors of all time, maybe my favorite actor of all time. And this is what maybe his best performance, and he's just so layered, he's so varied in this, starting off as this young sort of kid, and then transitioning into sort of this old guy. I was actually watching a movie recently called The Music Within with Ron Livingston and Michael Sheen. It was a pretty good movie, but Ron Livingston has to play like a high schooler and then college kid, and then it's like, okay, you don't look like that, but he looks like an older version when he plays sort of an adult. But Tom Cruise does an incredible job of playing this 18-year-old kid really wanting to go into the war, and then when he gets injured in the war and has to come out, and sort of his negativity against it. As you can see sort of on the back here, he's got long hair and a mustache, and you can really see that transformation where you feel like you've been watching this guy throughout the years. It's not like this baby-faced guy and he can't play an adult, or an adult who can't play a kid. Tom Cruise does an amazing job at playing both a kid and then transitioning into an adult. You totally believe it, and that's why I go back to that sort of that leap in logic. Even though it's the same guy, it's the same actor, just with a mustache and long hair and whatnot, you still really believe that. And there's not too many years where it's like he's an old man. It's not like this huge sort of life epic, but it is definitely going throughout the years, and Tom Cruise does a great job with that. And I actually have an interesting sort of topic and sort of theory about the movie in terms of what it's sort of about and what it is sort of trying to say. I actually have the unique perspective of looking at it as a great metaphor for adulthood. And he starts off this 18-year-old kid going into the war, and he's bright-eyed, and he's like, yeah, my grandfather served in World War I, my dad served in World War II, this is my war, the Vietnam War, I'm going to serve in it, it's in my family. That's definitely a tale for a lot of people, for sure. And really just shows that, like, using that theme of death and war to sort of show that symbolism of the transition of, he's this bright-eyed kid and having a nice time. No, this is real life. This is a shock of real life. This happens. You have to, like, you can always say, I would always save the family. I want to serve my country. You know what I mean? But when you're in the shit, for an example, do you really believe that? Will you be able to sort of perform? And it's sort of that great thing with adulthood. It's like, okay, you're done school now. You're out into the real world. Can you survive on your own? Can you do those small little things like dishes and whatnot? Or, you know what I mean? To even the bigger things like managing money and sort of getting a job and whatnot. And, hopefully you've been prepared for that. But, this is sort of the show of adulthood and whatnot. But in my opinion, this is actually the best Vietnam War movie ever. That's a sort of a huge statement for a lot of people, but I can see why, like, they can say, like, oh, Platoon or Apocalypse Now, but something like Platoon, another Oliver Stone movie, a great, great movie, that really shows the Vietnam War in the terms of war. In Vietnam, sort of what happens, the camaraderie between the people, the sort of atmosphere, what happened in Vietnam. And then Apocalypse Now is sort of a tale of what the Vietnam War was like. Not like, of course, the filming, but also the movie experience. Just you feel like what it was like, sort of like you're in and out, and you don't know what's real and what's not. And should you shoot these people? Are these civilians? Are they not? It's a very interesting movie. Apocalypse Now, a great, great movie. But for me, the best part about this movie is that it captures the beginning part, so of the attitude of before the war, of, we're going back to war. We won World War II. War is a good thing, you know what I mean? Because America was actually an isolationist country, so they didn't really be in World War I at all, really, until the tail end. And then World War II, they did a lot and really came in, but they were always an isolationist country in terms of they were by themselves. They said, during World War I, they're like, you fight your war, we're there, we have no ties, we're a neutral party. But then really after World War II, they started getting to more and more. And that's a lot of people's complaint with the Vietnam War, is like, it was useless, it was just war for war's sake. And so you show the beginning of that, of people, the positive outlook, and then you show the war itself and him and Tom Cruise in the war. And then, of course, the sort of end part of the movie, the meat of the movie, is afterwards, and the sort of change in people's views of the war. It really is sort of a change in ideology, where the guy at the beginning is really into the war, and then he goes to the war, and now he's sort of questioning it, and it really is a change of heart. And it shows the change of the country, but the change of one character. Because most people at the beginning were like, really into the war, and there was there were some people, like his brother, wasn't really into the war because he's sort of a young kid. But when then they come back, people are like, this is not right. Why are we here? There's so many people dying. All of this sort of sayings. LBJ, LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, the president at the time, the chant was LBJ, LBJ. How many kids have you killed today? Because all these protests and whatnot. And this is a really heated topic, and really shows the impact of the Vietnam War. And that's why I love this movie. And I think it's the best Vietnam War movie, because not only does it show the Vietnam War, but it shows the impact of it on the country. In this case, America, but it really is a study of like sort of the 5 years before the Vietnam War, and then while it's happening, and then the years afterwards, and it really shows sort of like effects that people have really talked about. There's times of like they talk about PTSD and mental health, and especially 1989. This wasn't really a hotly sort of debated like issue, and as it is today, mental illness. So really tackling these great topics, Oliver Stone does a great job with. And then there's the character of Ron transforming from just like how he sees his ideals change. And it is sort of like a period piece in the sense of we really look at 70s America and society and what that means for America at the time. And then I really want to point out, actually, it is a sad movie. It's a bleak movie. It's about the Vietnam War. It's not a sort of happy-go-lucky movie. But another thing I want to point out is Tom Cruise's performance. Like I said, this is his best performance, but I also want to point out he really goes for it, and he dives and he puts all his effort into this one movie. And we see that throughout all of his other movies. Tom Cruise is not a Bruce Willis. He's not a Robert De Niro who do it for the paycheck and they phone it in. When he's in the movie, he totally goes into the movie. That's why he's the biggest action star today, one of the only movie stars we have left. But he really just goes and dives into those roles, and that's why he's so acclaimed and why people still want to watch his movies, because he's taking it seriously and he's having fun and he's really trying his best. And Born on the 4th of July, I really think he just goes for it and he nails it on the head. And people say he's a little Oscar-y, a little showy. I don't think so. I think it's so real, so emotional. And this is one of my dad's favorite movies, so we bonded over that. But it really is a great director. And Oliver Stone won Best Director for this movie, so that just shows you something. Let's actually move over into the underrated section. That is Natural Born Killers. I say this is underrated just because I think it has a 46% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's just a lot of fun, sort of a cynical look at modern society. And if you don't know the stories about mass murderers who become famous, and there's a line in the movie where it's like, I wouldn't be, I'm not going to be a mass murderer. Like, I'm not a murderer, but if I were to be, I would want to be like the two characters from, Woody Harrelson and Juliette Davis? Oh, I'm forgetting her name, unfortunately. But those two characters, and just, they totally nail it, and the movie's sort of like batshit insane. It's sort of like Fear and Loathing Las Vegas, where it's like trippy and you don't know what's going on, and it's super interesting and super bold, and it's very dynamic, and it splits a lot of people. People think it's like, oh, it's not very good, but I'm really into it. And if you love it, you love it, and it really dives you into it. So if you want to see something new and different and experimental, Natural Born Killers is the way, because it's very funny, and it's a very much a political satire, something that Stone really hasn't done in terms of comedies, but this one is definitely in the wheelhouse of that satire of look how like crazy we are, like sort of reflection on that. In a sense, it is like a sci-fi movie where it allows you to reflect, but it also is very violent and very funny, and but just shows how like we definitely come like savages, but and it also is a sort of a cynical movie. It's definitely the negative aspects, not necessarily the good aspects, which is Stone's sort of trademark, sort of focusing on that negatives. But anyways, guys, just like the video, comment below, tell me know what your favorite Oliver Stone movie is. Do you like him? Are you sort of rubbed the wrong way by him? What's your opinion if you're an American out there of him? I'd like to know. Anyways, guys, my name's Connor Rold, and until next time, stay tuned.